Give the emerald to Madison. Victoria doesn't belong in this family anymore. Nathan Caldwell said those words with a calm smile, never realizing that the woman standing just outside the room had heard every single one of them. For a few seconds, Victoria Whitmore didn't move. She simply stood there, her hand resting on the door handle, listening to the man she had loved explain why another woman deserved the symbol of his family's legacy more than she did. Inside the luxurious Caldwell penthouse, the city lights of New York reflected across the glass walls. Everything looked perfect. The marble floors, the expensive artwork, the carefully arranged flowers on the dining table. It was the kind of place people dreamed about. But Victoria suddenly felt like she was standing in a stranger's home. Madison Blake laughed softly as she looked at the emerald necklace resting inside the velvet box. "Are you sure your family won't have a problem with this?" she asked. Nathan poured himself a drink and looked completely confident. "My family cares about tradition, but they also care about appearances. And honestly, Madison, you understand this world better than she ever did." Victoria closed her eyes for a moment. That sentence hurt more than she expected. Not because Nathan chose the emerald. Not because Madison was wearing a smile that said she had already won. It hurt because after 7 years of marriage, after all the quiet sacrifices, Nathan still believed he was the one who gave her value. Victoria slowly looked down at her wedding ring. A simple band she had chosen because she never cared about showing wealth. She cared about the person who placed it on her finger. At least, she used to. "You know," Madison said, admiring the emerald, "some things are meant for people who truly represent a family." Nathan nodded. "Exactly." Victoria finally opened the door. The sound was quiet, but both of them turned immediately. Nathan's expression changed when he saw her standing there. "Victoria," he said, his voice suddenly softer. "How long have you been there?" She looked at him, and for the first time in years, Nathan saw something different in her eyes. Not anger, not jealousy, something much harder to understand. Acceptance. "Long enough," she replied. Madison quickly lowered the necklace, pretending to look uncomfortable. "Victoria, I think you misunderstood." "No," Victoria interrupted gently. "I understood everything." Nathan stepped forward. "This isn't what it looks like." Victoria almost smiled at that. The same sentence people used when they knew exactly what something looked like. "Actually, Nathan, I think it's exactly what it looks like." The room became silent. For years, Victoria had been the woman standing beside him while he built his empire. She had supported him when nobody knew his name. She had believed in him before the expensive suits, before the headlines, before people started calling him one of New York's rising business leaders. But somewhere along the way, Nathan stopped seeing her as his partner. He started seeing her as a reminder of a life he wanted to outgrow. "I just think we both know things have changed," Nathan finally said. Victoria looked at him carefully. "Yes, they have." He expected tears. He expected an argument. He expected the woman who always tried to save their marriage to fight for him one more time. But Victoria simply removed her ring and placed it gently on the table beside the emerald box. "You're right about one thing, Nathan." She looked directly at him. "Things have changed." Madison watched silently as Victoria walked away. Nathan stared at the ring left behind, still believing he had won. He had no idea that the woman he had just dismissed was about to reveal a truth that would change everything he thought he knew about power, family, and the woman he once called his wife. Because Nathan Caldwell's biggest mistake was believing Victoria Whitmore needed his family name. He never knew she had one of her own. The next morning, Victoria Whitmore woke up in the same apartment she had shared with Nathan for years, but for the first time, it did not feel like home. The silence around her felt different. It was not the painful silence of waiting for someone to come back. It was the silence of finally hearing her own thoughts. She sat by the window with a cup of coffee in her hands, watching New York slowly come alive below her. For years, she had built her days around Nathan's dreams. His meetings, his deadlines, his ambitions. She had convinced herself that supporting him was what love looked like. But last night changed something inside her. Not because of Madison, not even because of the emerald. It changed because Nathan had looked at her and made her feel like she was a guest in the life she helped build. Her phone rang. The name on the screen was Julian Mercer. Victoria answered after a moment. "I was wondering when you would call," Julian said. His voice was calm, but he already knew something had happened. Victoria looked at the wedding ring sitting on the table. I heard him, Julian. There was a pause. Are you sure you want to move forward? He asked. Victoria leaned back in her chair. Years ago, when she married Nathan, she made a promise to herself. She wanted someone who loved Victoria Whitmore, not the Whitmore name. That was why she kept her family background private. She wanted a normal life. A real marriage. I spent 7 years protecting his pride, she said quietly. I think it is time I protect my own. Across town, Nathan Caldwell was already telling himself a different story. In his office overlooking Manhattan, he stood beside a wall of awards and photographs. He believed last night had simply been an emotional moment. He thought Victoria would calm down. She always did. She always forgave him. When his assistant entered with documents, Nathan barely looked up. Send these to Victoria. I want everything handled quickly. The assistant hesitated. Mr. Caldwell, are you certain? Nathan frowned. About what? About ending the marriage. Nathan gave a small, confident smile. Victoria is a good person, but she does not understand the world I live in anymore. He did not notice the irony in his own words. He did not realize that Victoria understood his world better than he ever knew. Later that afternoon, Victoria met Julian at a quiet cafe away from the attention of the business world. He placed a folder on the table between them. Your grandmother created this trust for one reason, Julian explained. She wanted you to have the freedom to choose your own life. Victoria opened the folder slowly. Inside were documents connected to Whitmore Capital, one of the most influential private investment groups in the country. She had avoided this world for years. She wanted to be loved without power behind her name. Nathan never knew, Julian said. Victoria closed the folder. No, and that was the point. Julian studied her carefully. What happens now? Victoria looked out the cafe window at people walking through the city, each carrying their own hidden stories. I do not want revenge, she said. I want the truth. Meanwhile, Nathan prepared for the Caldwell family gala, believing he was stepping into a new chapter of his life. Madison would wear the emerald. The family would celebrate. Everyone would see that he had moved on. But what Nathan did not know was that the woman he thought he had left behind was about to walk into his world from a position he never imagined. And this time, Victoria would not be standing beside him. She would be standing as someone he could no longer ignore. For the first time in years, Victoria Whitmore walked into a room without wondering how other people expected her to act. She did not choose her clothes to match Nathan's business events. She did not lower her voice so she would not appear too confident. She did not hide pieces of herself to make someone else comfortable. She simply walked into the Whitmore Foundation headquarters and remembered who she had always been. The building stood in downtown Manhattan, surrounded by some of the most powerful companies in the world. But inside those walls, Victoria was not known as Nathan Caldwell's wife. She was known by her own name. It has been a long time since you came back here, Julian Mercer said as they stepped into the private conference room. Victoria looked around quietly. The last time she had been there, she was 28 years old, trying to convince her family that she wanted a simple life. I never stopped being part of this family, she replied. I just wanted to know if someone could love me without knowing what came with my name. Julian nodded. He understood. Victoria had spent years protecting Nathan from the truth because she wanted their relationship to be real. She wanted the man who held her hand during difficult times, not someone impressed by $1 billion trust. But now, after hearing him say she did not belong, she finally understood something important. Love could not survive when only one person was protecting it. Meanwhile, Nathan was preparing for the Caldwell family gala. His entire week was focused on the event. The guest list included executives, investors, and people who could influence the future of his company. Madison Blake had already started appearing beside him at public events, enjoying the attention that came with being connected to the Caldwell name. Everyone is going to love the emerald, Madison told him while looking at the invitation list. Nathan smiled. It has always represented the Caldwell family. Madison touched the necklace box carefully. Then giving it to me means something. Nathan looked at her confidently. It means the future matters. He did not notice the way his words revealed exactly who he had become. To Nathan, everything was about image, legacy, status, appearances. He had forgotten that the person standing beside him during the hardest years of his life had never asked for any of those things. That evening, Victoria sat across from Julian reviewing the documents connected to her family foundation. You know what surprises me the most? She said. Julian looked up. What? Victoria closed the folder. He never asked why I chose a quiet life. She paused. He just assumed it meant I had nothing. Julian leaned back. Sometimes people only recognize value when it is displayed in front of them. Victoria gave a small smile. Then maybe it is time he sees it. A few days earlier, Nathan believed Victoria leaving was simply an emotional reaction. He expected her to call. He expected her to apologize. He expected her to come back to the life he built. But the woman he was waiting for was no longer the woman who walked away from his penthouse. Victoria was done asking to be chosen. Now she was preparing to show the world exactly who she was. And the first place everyone would see it was the Caldwell family gala, the same place Nathan planned to introduce Madison as the woman who belonged by his side. The Caldwell family gala was the kind of event people talked about long after the last guest left. The ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers, with executives, investors, and old family friends gathering to celebrate the Caldwell legacy. For Nathan Caldwell, it was more than a celebration. It was a statement. Tonight was the night he would prove everyone that his future was moving forward. He stood near the entrance in a perfectly tailored black suit, shaking hands and smiling for every camera. Beside him, Madison Blake wore the emerald necklace that once represented generations of Caldwell tradition. She looked around the room with confidence, enjoying every second of attention. "You look incredible," Nathan whispered. Madison smiled. "I know this necklace means a lot to your family." Nathan looked at the emerald proudly. "It means the future is changing." He did not notice the quiet disappointment on some of his family members' faces. They knew Victoria. They knew the years she spent beside Nathan before anyone cared about his name. They remembered when she was the only person who believed in him. But Nathan was too focused on creating a perfect image to notice what he was losing. As the evening continued, Nathan stepped onto the stage. The room slowly became quiet. "Tonight is about honoring tradition," he announced. "But it is also about looking ahead." Madison stood nearby, smiling. Everyone assumed he was about to make a major announcement. Nathan continued. "The Caldwell name has always represented strength, loyalty, and vision. And I believe the future should be represented by someone who understands that world." Several guests exchanged uncomfortable looks. They knew exactly who he was talking about. Then the ballroom doors opened. At first, nobody paid much attention. People were used to important guests arriving late. But this time, the room slowly became silent. Victoria Whitmore stepped inside. She wore a simple but elegant black gown, nothing flashy, nothing designed to compete for attention. She did not need to. Her confidence did that for her. Conversation stopped. People turned. Nathan froze in the middle of his speech. "Victoria," he said quietly. She looked at him calmly. "Good evening, Nathan." Madison's expression changed immediately. She leaned closer to Nathan. "Why is she here?" Nathan did not answer. Because for the first time that night, he did not know what to say. Victoria walked through the room, with Julian Mercer beside her. Several guests greeted her warmly. Some executives stood up from their seats. A few whispered her name with surprise. Nathan noticed. He noticed how people looked at her. Not with sympathy. Not with curiosity. With respect. "What is going on?" Madison asked, her confidence beginning to disappear. Nathan forced a smile. "I do not know." Victoria stopped near the stage and looked at the emerald around Madison's neck. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Madison smiled slightly. "I assume you came because you wanted to discuss this," she said, touching the necklace. "It is beautiful, isn't it?" Victoria looked at her and answered calmly. "Yes, it is." Madison expected jealousy, anger, a reaction, but Victoria gave her nothing. That made Madison uncomfortable. Nathan stepped forward. "Victoria, this is not the place." Victoria looked at him. "Actually, Nathan, I think this is exactly the place." The room went completely quiet. She looked around at the people who had watched her marriage become a public story. Then she turned back to Nathan. "Because tonight, everyone deserves to know the truth." Nathan's expression changed. For the first time, he felt something he had not felt in years. Uncertainty. And before he could ask what she meant, the host of the event returned to the microphone with a confused expression. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "we have just received a request from Whitmore Foundation regarding tonight's announcement." Nathan's face lost its confidence. Victoria simply stood there, calm and composed, because the room was about to discover the one thing Nathan Caldwell never knew. The woman he thought he replaced had been the person with the power all along. The ballroom that had been filled with confident conversations suddenly became completely silent. Every person in the room was looking toward Victoria Whitmore, waiting to understand why the woman Nathan Caldwell had dismissed was standing there with such calm confidence. Nathan remained near the stage, his hand still holding the microphone, but the certainty he had carried all evening was gone. "Victoria," he said again, lowering his voice. "What are you doing?" She looked at him for a moment before answering. "I am here because this family has spent years protecting a legacy. I think everyone deserves to know what that legacy really means." Madison's expression tightened. She looked around and noticed something she had not expected. Nobody was laughing at Victoria. Nobody was whispering about her being unwanted. Instead, several executives were standing with respect. People who had barely noticed Madison all evening were now watching Victoria. "Nathan," Madison whispered. "Why does everyone know her?" Nathan did not answer, because he was asking himself the same question. The host of the gala stepped forward, holding a tablet with a confused expression. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue tonight's program, there has been a special request from Whitmore Foundation." The name immediately changed the atmosphere. Some guests looked surprised. Others looked at Victoria with recognition. Nathan's face became serious. He knew the name. Everyone in the business world knew it. But he never connected it to the quiet woman who made coffee for him in the mornings and remembered every small detail about his life. "This cannot be happening," Nathan whispered. Julian Mercer stepped forward and calmly handed a document to the event coordinator. "Please read the statement." The coordinator opened the document. "Tonight, Whitmore Foundation would like to recognize the long-standing partnership between the Whitmore family and the Caldwell family." Nathan looked confused. "Partnership?" Victoria looked at him. "You never asked where my family came from." The words hit harder than any accusation could have, because she was right. Nathan had never asked. He had created a version of Victoria in his mind and convinced himself it was the truth. The coordinator continued. "The Whitmore Foundation has been the primary private investment partner behind several major Caldwell developments over the last decade." A wave of whispers moved through the room. Nathan's eyes widened. He looked at Julian, then at Victoria. "No," he said quietly. "That is not possible." Victoria remained calm. "Why not?" she asked. "Because you thought you knew me?" Nathan stepped closer. "You never told me." Victoria nodded slowly. "I wanted to know if you loved me without knowing my name." The room became even quieter. Madison touched the emerald around her neck, suddenly uncomfortable. The necklace she had proudly worn all night no longer felt like a symbol of victory. It felt like a reminder of everything she misunderstood. "The emerald," Victoria said, looking at the necklace. "It was never just jewelry." Nathan followed her gaze. "Then what was it?" Victoria looked around the room. "A symbol of trust between two families. My grandmother protected that tradition for decades." Madison quickly removed her hand from the necklace. "Are you saying it belongs to you?" Victoria shook her head. "No, I am saying something more important. It was never about who wore it." She paused. "It was about who respected what it represented." Nathan felt the weight of those words. For the first time, he understood that Victoria had not been fighting for a necklace. She had been watching to see if he valued the person wearing it. The woman he thought was powerless had been the one person in the room who never needed his approval. Then Julian stepped forward again with one final document. "There is one more announcement." Nathan looked uneasy. "What now?" Julian opened the folder. "Whitmore Foundation has decided to review all current Caldwell investment agreements effective immediately." The confidence disappeared from Nathan's face. Because this was no longer about an emerald. This was about the future of everything he had built. And for the first time, Nathan Caldwell realized the woman he pushed away was not coming back to ask for a place in his world. She had arrived to show him that she already had one of her own. The night that was supposed to celebrate Nathan Caldwell's victory ended with him sitting alone in his office, staring at numbers he could not ignore. The same man who walked into the gala believing he controlled every conversation was now surrounded by questions he did not have answers for. The room was dark except for the glow of his computer screen. On it were reports from his financial team, messages from investors, and one sentence that kept appearing again and again. "Review pending." Nathan leaned back in his chair, trying to convince himself this was temporary. "This is just a misunderstanding," he said quietly. Victoria is making an emotional decision. But deep down, he knew that was not true. Victoria had not looked emotional. She had looked certain. The next morning, Nathan arrived at Caldwell headquarters expecting his usual routine. He expected assistants to greet him, executives to ask for his direction, and employees to follow his lead. Instead, he noticed something different. Conversations stopped when he walked by. People looked away. The confidence that once surrounded him was beginning to disappear. His chief financial officer, Daniel Brooks, entered his office with a serious expression. "Nathan, we need to talk." Nathan looked up. "About the foundation review?" Daniel nodded. "Yes. Some of our investors are concerned." Nathan frowned. "Concerned about what?" "The company is stronger than ever." Daniel placed a folder on the desk. "They are concerned because they did not realize how much of our growth depended on Whitmore Capital." Nathan opened the folder slowly. Inside were contracts, investment records, and partnership agreements dating back years. Documents he had never paid attention to because he had always assumed he was the person creating opportunities. Then he saw Victoria's name connected to every major expansion. The woman he thought was standing behind him had actually been standing beside him the entire time. "Why did nobody tell me?" Nathan asked. Daniel hesitated. "Because your marriage made everyone assume you already knew." That answer hurt more than he expected. Everyone assumed he knew. Everyone except him. Meanwhile, Victoria returned to Whitmore Foundation. The attention from the gala did not excite her. She did not celebrate Nathan's discomfort. She simply returned to work. Julian noticed her quiet expression. "You have every reason to be angry," he said. Victoria looked through the office window. "I was angry for a long time." She paused. "But anger is not what I want controlling my life anymore." Julian nodded. "Then what do you want?" Victoria looked at the city below. "I want people to understand that respect cannot be replaced by money, status, or a last name." Later that afternoon, Nathan finally went to see Victoria. Not at their apartment. Not at a place where he felt comfortable. He went to her office, where she was surrounded by people who respected her. When Victoria saw him enter, she was not surprised. "Nathan." He looked different. Less certain. Less untouchable. "I need to talk to you." Victoria closed the folder in front of her. "About what?" Nathan took a breath. "About everything." For the first time, he was not speaking like a CEO. He was speaking like a man who realized he had lost something important. "I made mistakes." Victoria looked at him quietly. "You did." Nathan lowered his eyes. "I did not know who you were." Victoria's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained calm. "That was never the problem." She stood and walked toward the window. "The problem was that you never tried to know me." Nathan had no answer. Because for years, he had searched for power everywhere except the person who had been beside him. Before he left, Victoria stopped him. "Nathan." He turned around. "The hardest part was not losing the marriage." She looked at him. "It was realizing I was alone in it long before it ended." Nathan walked out without saying another word. But outside the office, another surprise was waiting. Madison Blake had just learned something that could change everything. The emerald she wore at the gala was not the only thing connected to the Whitmore legacy. And the truth about how Nathan gave it away was about to create a problem he never saw coming. Madison Blake had always believed she understood exactly how the world worked. She believed beauty opened doors, confidence kept people interested, and standing beside the right person could change her entire future. But that belief started to disappear the moment she learned the emerald around her neck was never just a family treasure. It was connected to a legacy she never truly understood. She sat in her apartment, staring at the necklace resting on the table in front of her. For the first time since the gala, she was not admiring it. She was questioning everything. Her phone rang. It was Nathan. She answered quickly, hoping to hear reassurance. "Nathan, what is happening?" she asked. There was silence on the other end. "Madison, where did you get the idea that the emerald was officially yours?" Her expression changed. "You gave it to me." Nathan closed his eyes. "I said you could wear it." The difference between those two things suddenly felt enormous. Madison stood up. "You told everyone it represented the future." Nathan did not respond, because now he understood something he had ignored. He had been so focused on making a statement that he never confirmed whether he had the right to make it. "Nathan," Madison said, her voice becoming colder, "what exactly did Victoria know?" He looked out the window of his office. "More than I did." Those words stayed with her. Meanwhile, Victoria continued working with Whitmore Foundation, refusing to celebrate Nathan's struggles. She reviewed company reports, met with advisors, and focused on protecting employees who had nothing to do with the choices Nathan made. Julian noticed her patience. Most people would use this moment to destroy him, he said. Victoria looked up from the documents. Destroying someone is easy. She paused. Building something better takes more strength. But even Victoria knew the situation was becoming more complicated. Nathan's company was not just facing financial pressure. It was facing a crisis of trust. The board members who once supported him were now questioning his decisions. They wanted answers about the investments he had taken for granted. Later that evening, Nathan returned home to an empty apartment. The place that once represented success now felt cold and unfamiliar. He looked around and noticed small things he had ignored for years. A photograph from their first vacation. A book Victoria had left on the shelf. A handwritten note she once placed beside his desk before an important presentation. He remembered how she used to believe in him before everyone else did. For the first time, he wondered if he had lost the only person who truly saw him. The next morning, Nathan received an unexpected message from Madison. "We need to talk." When they met, she did not look like the confident woman from the gala. She looked uncertain. "I found something," Madison said. She placed a folder on the table. Nathan opened it and immediately recognized the documents. They were copies of private communications connected to the Emerald's history. "Where did you get these?" he asked. Madison looked away. "I was trying to understand what I was wearing." Nathan continued reading. Then he stopped. The Emerald had not only been protected by the Whitmore family, it had also been connected to a condition that affected Caldwell's future partnerships. A condition Nathan never knew existed. "Victoria knew," he whispered. Madison looked at him. "No. She did more than know. She gave you a chance to tell the truth yourself." Nathan felt a heavy silence fill the room. Because suddenly, the biggest mistake was no longer giving away the Emerald. The biggest mistake was believing Victoria would never have the strength to walk away. At that moment, Nathan received another call. His board members were requesting an emergency meeting. They had discovered something about the Caldwell company's history that could change everything. And this time, Nathan could not simply explain it away. The man who spent years controlling every situation was about to face the one thing he feared most: losing control completely. The emergency board meeting at Caldwell headquarters was unlike anything Nathan Caldwell had experienced before. For years, he had walked into that room knowing everyone would listen. He was the person making decisions, the person others trusted to have the answers. But this time, when Nathan entered, nobody looked impressed. Nobody looked confident in him. They looked concerned. The board members sat around the long conference table, reviewing documents that had changed the entire direction of the company. Nathan took his seat and looked around. "I assume everyone knows why we are here," he said. His voice was steady, but he knew the situation was different. Daniel Brooks placed a report in front of him. "We discovered several issues connected to the original investment agreements." Nathan opened the report. The details were clear. Years ago, when Caldwell Corporation was struggling to expand, Whitmore Capital had stepped in with financial support. But the agreement had one important condition. The partnership depended on responsible leadership and ethical decisions from Caldwell executives. Nathan stared at the page. "Who approved this condition?" he asked. Daniel looked at him. "Your father did." Nathan became quiet. His father had always respected the Whitmore family. He had always told Nathan that reputation was built by character, not appearances. But Nathan had spent years believing success meant something else. "Victoria knew about this?" one board member asked. Daniel nodded. "She was always aware." Nathan lowered his eyes. Suddenly, every moment from the past few weeks felt different. Victoria had not been trying to embarrass him. She had been waiting to see if he would take responsibility without being forced. Meanwhile, Victoria sat in her office reviewing the same information with Julian. "The board could remove him," Julian said. Victoria looked at the report in front of her. "That is their decision." Julian studied her expression. "You are not angry anymore." Victoria gave a small smile. "I am still hurt." She paused. "But I learned something. Holding on to anger keeps you connected to someone who already chose to let you go." Julian nodded. "Then what happens now?" Victoria closed the folder. "Now I make sure the employees and families depending on that company are protected." That was the difference Nathan never understood. Victoria was not interested in watching him fall. She was interested in making sure his mistakes did not hurt innocent people. Later that evening, Nathan arrived at Victoria's office one more time. This time, he did not walk in with confidence. He did not act like a CEO giving instructions. He stood at the door waiting for permission. Victoria looked up. "What do you need, Nathan?" He took a moment before answering. "I need to admit something." She stayed silent. "I spent years thinking you needed me," he said. "I thought I was the person who gave you a place in this world." Victoria looked at him calmly. "And now?" Nathan swallowed. "Now I realize I was lucky you chose me." For a moment, Victoria saw the man she married years ago. Not the man obsessed with status. Not the man who wanted everyone to admire him. Just Nathan, the person she once believed in. But she also remembered the pain of being overlooked for so long. "Nathan, regret is not the same as change." He nodded slowly. "I know." Before he left, his phone rang. It was Madison. Nathan answered. Her voice sounded different. "Nathan, there is something you need to know." He looked toward Victoria, then stepped away. "What is it?" Madison hesitated. "The emerald situation is not the only thing. Someone has been hiding information about the Caldwell family for years." Nathan's expression changed. "Who?" There was a long pause. "Your father." Nathan froze. Because if that was true, then the story he believed about his family, his company, and even his own success was built on a truth he had never discovered. And the final piece of the mystery was about to reveal why Victoria had always been the one person his family trusted most. 1 year later, the name Caldwell Corporation was still known across the business world, but it was no longer known because of Nathan Caldwell's ambition. It was known because of the changes that happened after he finally learned the difference between power and responsibility. The company survived, not because one person saved it, but because people finally stopped protecting appearances and started protecting what truly mattered. Nathan stood in the lobby of the Caldwell headquarters, watching employees walk through the building. A year ago, he would have seen them as numbers on a report. Today, he saw the people behind those numbers. The assistant who supported her family. The employees who trusted the company with their futures. The families who depended on the decisions made inside those walls. His phone rang. It was Victoria. For a moment, Nathan simply looked at her name on the screen. A year earlier, he would have answered expecting forgiveness. Now he understood that some things could not be fixed by words alone. "Hello, Victoria," he said. "Nathan," she replied calmly. "I wanted to let you know the Foundation's review is complete." He nodded, even though she could not see him. "And the company is stable. The employees are protected. The partnership will continue." Nathan closed his eyes for a moment. "Thank you." There was a pause. "Do not thank me," Victoria said softly. "Thank the people who worked hard to rebuild what was damaged." Nathan smiled slightly. That was always the difference between them. He looked for recognition. She looked for purpose. Later that afternoon, Nathan met Victoria at a quiet cafe in Manhattan. Not a fancy restaurant. Not a place filled with cameras or important people. Just two people sitting across from each other, finally seeing the truth. "I used to think losing you meant losing my perfect life," Nathan said. Victoria listened quietly. "But I realize now I lost something much more important." He looked down at his coffee. "I lost the person who believed in me before anyone else did." Victoria took a breath. "Nathan, I did believe in you." She paused. "That was why it hurt so much when you stopped believing in me." He nodded because there was nothing he could say to change that. Some mistakes did not disappear just because someone finally understood them. "I hope you know something," Nathan said. "You were never less than anyone. Not because of your family name. Not because of your money. You were always enough." Victoria smiled gently. "I know that now." Those words were different from what Nathan expected. He thought he wanted her forgiveness. But what he really needed was to see that Victoria had already healed without needing him to validate her. Months later, Victoria stood at a Whitmore Foundation event, speaking to young women who were building their own futures. She did not talk about Nathan. She did not talk about the emerald. She talked about identity. About confidence. About never allowing someone else's opinion to define your worth. "Sometimes," she told the audience, "people will misunderstand your silence. They will think you are weak because you choose peace instead of proving yourself." She smiled. "But silence can be powerful. Sometimes it is the moment when you remember who you are." Across the room, Nathan watched quietly. He did not interrupt. He did not ask for another chance. He simply listened. Because for the first time, he respected the woman he once failed to see. Victoria Whitmore did not win because she took something from him. She won because she finally stopped measuring her value by whether someone else recognized it. And that was the lesson Nathan Caldwell learned too late. The greatest mistake a person can make is underestimating someone who knows their own worth. Because the person you ignore today may be the person who reminds you tomorrow that true power was never about what you owned. It was about who you became when nobody was watching.